Hey there, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're stepping into the world of Charlotte Mason.
A name you might recognize.
Yeah, if you've spent any time exploring educational philosophies.
Right.
But we're not here to give you a biography, though.
No.
We're going deeper.
Much deeper.
Specifically into Mason's take on what it truly means to educate.
It's a big one.
It is a big one, and she throws us a curveball right off the bat. It's not just about the mind, filling it with facts and figures.
Right.
For Mason, the real heart of education lies in the well-being of the soul.
That's right. And she doesn't shy away from that word soul.
Right.
Even though it wasn't exactly common dinner table conversation back in her day.
Yeah.
Mason was way ahead of her time. Think of it this way. She paints this picture of education as a grand temple.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this temple analogy.
So the mind and the body, those are like the outer courts of the temple, important foundations, for sure. But Mason argues there's this inner sanctum, the Holy of Holies, and that's where we find the soul.
The Holy of Holies, gotta love a dramatic image.
It's good. It's good.
But what's the significance of putting the soul at the very center of education?
Mason believed that the soul is that part of us that craves something bigger.
Mm-hmm.
It's that yearning we all have for meaning, for purpose, for something that transcends the everyday. She even wrote, and this really stuck with me, he has an urgent, incessant, irrepressible need of the infinite.
You know, we talk a lot about self-care these days, but what Mason's getting at here feels deeper, more essential, don't you think? It's like she's saying we also need soul care.
Yes.
And that education has a role to play in that.
Precisely, and that's the million-dollar question she grapples with. If we accept that the soul has these deep needs, how can education nourish them? How can we, as parents, as educators, as lifelong learners ourselves, help ourselves and our children connect with that sense of the infinite she's talking about?
It's a big question, and thankfully, Mason isn't shy about offering some answers.
She's got some thoughts.
She does, but what strikes me is that she doesn't just talk about the soul in this abstract, ethereal way. She connects it to something very concrete. Knowledge.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For Mason, knowledge wasn't just about accumulating facts. It was food for the soul. And she was very specific about the kind of knowledge she believed could truly nourish us. She had this wonderful term, divine words.
Divine words. That sounds intriguing. What does she mean by that?
Well, think about it. The word divine implies something that connects us to something greater than ourselves, right? And for Mason, those divine words were found in two primary places, the Bible and poetry.
Okay, so we're not talking about your typical textbook here.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, I'm curious. How did she square this with her belief in a well-rounded education? Was she saying that these divine words were all we needed?
That's where Mason gets really interesting. She wasn't advocating for a narrow, scripture-only approach. Mm-hmm. Remember, this is Victorian England, where religious instruction was pretty standard.
Right.
But Mason saw the Bible as something different, something more. Not just a collection of stories, but a treasury of divine words. Words that spoke directly to that innate desire within us to understand God, to understand our place in the universe.
A treasury of divine words. I love that phrasing.
It's beautiful.
It makes you think about the Bible in a whole new light.
It does.
But it wasn't just about the Bible for her, right? She felt that poetry played a similar role in nourishing the soul.
Exactly. And for Mason, poetry wasn't just about pretty language or rhyming words.
Mm-hmm.
It was a way for children, in particular, to grapple with profound ideas and complex emotions in a way that felt natural, engaging, almost instinctive.
And she has this fantastic anecdote to illustrate this point, right? Something about a group of young girls encountering some pretty high-level poetry. I'd love to hear more about that.
Oh, it's a classic Mason moment. She describes this class of 13-year-old girls who were given an essay about the poet George Herbert. Now, keep in mind, these girls had never encountered Herbert before, but after just one reading, they were able to dissect his poems and, really dig into the themes, the language, the nuances effortlessly.
Effortlessly. Okay, that's impressive.
It's pretty remarkable.
I know I wouldn't be pulling that off after a single read-through.
Right.
What was Mason's takeaway from this little experiment? Did it confirm what she already believed, or was this a turning point for her?
It was a revelation for her. This experience demonstrated to her that children have this incredible, often untapped capacity for understanding complex ideas. They don't need everything watered down or simplified. In fact, sometimes it's the simplest, most direct encounters with beauty and truth that resonate most deeply.
It's such a powerful reminder, isn't it? to not underestimate the ability of young minds to grasp big ideas when they're presented in the right way.
It really is, and it challenges us to rethink our approaches to education. What are we potentially holding back by assuming that certain concepts are too advanced or over children's heads? What if, as Mason suggests, we simply presented those ideas, those divine words, and trusted in children's innate capacity to make meaning?
It's a question worth pondering, for sure, especially as we think about how to create learning experiences that are both engaging and deeply nourishing for the soul. But Mason wasn't just advocating for certain approaches to education. She was also quite critical of trends she felt were actually getting in the way of true soul nourishment.
You're right, and she didn't hold back. She could be surprisingly feisty for someone so deeply invested in the power of words.
So we've been talking about Mason's belief in the power of divine words to nourish the soul.
Right.
But you said she was also critical of some popular educational trends of her time.
Yeah.
What were those trends, and why did she see them as such a problem?
Well, imagine a classroom where the teacher's voice just drones on, lecturing, explaining, examining. This is a common scene in Mason's time.
Right.
And she felt this constant barrage of talk, as she called it, actually stifled the child's natural curiosity.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like we can sometimes explain the wonder right out of things.
Right.
Have you ever noticed that? Like if you over-explain a joke,
Yes.
it stops being funny.
Exactly. And for Mason, preserving that sense of wonder, that intrinsic love of learning, was crucial.
Right.
She worried that when education becomes all about passively absorbing information, we lose sight of the joy of discovery.
So too much talk was one of her pet peeves.
Yeah.
What else? Did she call out any other educational no-nos?
Oh, yes. She had another target in her sights. This time, it was the overemphasis on introspection.
Okay.
Remember, this is the late 19th century,
Right.
a time when psychoanalysis was just emerging, and there was this growing fascination with dissecting our thoughts and feelings, with constantly analyzing our inner lives.
Now, that's interesting because on the surface, self-reflection seems like a good thing, right? We hear about the importance of mindfulness and emotional intelligence all the time.
All the time.
So why did Mason have an issue with it, especially in the context of education?
That's where Mason's insight really shines through.
Okay.
She wasn't against self-reflection entirely, but she worried that this constant inward focus could actually hinder a child's intellectual and spiritual development. She believed that children needed to first nourish their minds with knowledge.
Okay.
With those divine words we talked about earlier,
Right.
they needed a rich and varied diet of ideas and experiences to draw upon.
So it's not that introspection is inherently bad, but it's about timing and balance.
Yes.
Like you wouldn't start a feast with the dessert, right?
Precisely.
Yeah.
Mason believed that once the mind was well-nourished, once children had this foundation of knowledge, then they could begin to synthesize, analyze, and reflect on those ideas.
Okay.
But to start with introspection, she argued, was like putting the cart before the horse.
It's all about laying the groundwork first, building that strong foundation of knowledge.
Exactly. And that's where those divine words, those encounters with truth and beauty found in great books and poetry come into play.
Right.
Mason believed that these weren't just sources of information,
Yeah.
but sources of nourishment for the soul. By immersing ourselves in these riches, we would naturally cultivate a love of learning, a sense of wonder about the world, and a deeper understanding of ourselves and our place in it.
It's such a powerful reminder that true education isn't just about filling our heads with facts.
Right.
It's about nourishing our souls.
Yes.
But it also begs the question, if all this talk and introspection wasn't the answer, what did Mason propose as an alternative?
Right.
How did she believe we should approach education to truly nurture those young minds and hearts?
Well, for Mason, it all came back to knowledge.
Okay.
Remember that quote we mentioned earlier about the soul's urgent, incessant, irrepressible need of the infinite?
Yes.
For her, this need wasn't something we could fulfill through endless analysis or empty chatter. It had to come from encountering something greater than ourselves.
Right.
And she believed that knowledge, true knowledge, was the key to unlocking that door.
Okay, so knowledge is key.
Yes.
But not just any kind of knowledge, right? She wasn't talking about memorizing lists of facts or regurgitating textbook definitions.
No.
What did Mason consider to be this true knowledge that could nourish the soul?
She called them living books.
Living books.
Think of books that are beautifully written, that grapple with substantial ideas, that spark your curiosity and stay with you long after you've finished reading them.
Okay.
These weren't just textbooks to be dissected and forgotten, but companions for the journey.
Living books. I love that.
Yeah.
It conjures up this image of books as dynamic, almost breathing things.
Right.
And it makes me think about my own relationship with reading.
Yeah.
Are the books I'm choosing truly living, truly nourishing my soul?
That's the question Mason challenges us to ask.
Right.
And it's not just about the books themselves, but how we approach them.
Okay.
She believed that when we engage with these living books with an open mind and a receptive heart,
Yeah.
they have the power to transform us from the inside out.
It's like she's saying that true learning isn't a passive process of absorption,
Right.
but an active engagement with ideas, a kind of conversation between the reader and the writer that transcends time and space.
Exactly. It's a dance between the mind and the heart, fueled by curiosity and a desire to make meaning. And within that dance, Mason believed we discover not just new information,
Yeah.
but new facets of ourselves.
So we've talked about Mason's critiques of overemphasizing talk and introspection in education.
We have.
And we've explored her belief in the power of living books to nourish the soul.
Right.
But I'm wondering how she reconciled her belief in the inherent goodness of knowledge with the reality that, well, humans aren't perfect.
Right.
We all have those less than desirable qualities,
They-
those seeds of baseness, as she called them.
Yeah.
How does she address that?
That's where Mason's thinking takes a surprisingly modern turn.
Okay.
Instead of trying to suppress or eliminate these seeds of baseness, she suggests a much more nuanced approach.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Yeah.
This sounds intriguing. How can we possibly make peace with those seeds of baseness?
Right.
Tell me more about Mason's approach.
Well, this is where her ideas get really interesting.
Okay.
She wrote, and I'm paraphrasing here, that the real safety, the true path to growth, lies in so nourishing the mind that the seeds of baseness may bear fruit of beauty. Wow. It's a good one.
That's a powerful statement.
It is.
She's not advocating for ignoring our flaws, but for transforming them.
Right.
It's like she's saying that instead of trying to eradicate our weaknesses,
Yes.
we should focus on cultivating a mind so strong, so filled with goodness and beauty,
Yes.
that even our flaws can be redeemed.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that we're not starting with a blank slate.
Right.
We all come to the table with our own unique set of strengths, weaknesses, and experiences. Right.
But Mason believed that through the transformative power of knowledge, through immersing ourselves in beauty and truth, we could cultivate the best versions of ourselves.
It's a profoundly hopeful perspective.
That is.
And one that has huge implications for how we think about education,
Yes.
both for ourselves and for our children.
Absolutely.
And it's also a challenging one, right?
It is.
Because it means embracing the complexity of human nature, the messiness of growth,
Yeah.
and the ongoing journey of becoming.
It really does.
It's like she's saying that education isn't about creating perfect beings,
No.
but about guiding the growth of whole human beings, complexities and all.
Exactly. And guiding that growth through this process of nourishing the mind with rich ideas and experiences. You know, this idea that we can actually transform ourselves through knowledge, it's not a new one.
Right.
It's a theme that echoes throughout history. Oh, I love when we can connect the dots like that. Give us some historical context here. What are some other points in time where we see this emphasis on education as a path to personal transformation?
Well, think about the ancient Greeks and their concept of paideia.
Okay.
It wasn't just about academics, but about shaping virtuous citizens through the pursuit of knowledge, art, and physical excellence.
Right.
Or consider the Renaissance humanists who championed the well-rounded individual, someone who had studied the classics, cultivated their artistic sensibilities, and developed their critical thinking skills.
Right.
Mason's ideas, while rooted in her own time, really resonate with these earlier traditions that saw education as a force for both personal and societal growth.
It's incredible how these ideas transcend time and place, isn't it?
It is.
That even centuries later, we're still wrestling with these same fundamental questions
Yeah.
about what it means to live a good life, how to cultivate our minds and hearts, and what role education should play in all of that.
Absolutely. And I think that's a testament to the enduring power of Mason's vision. She reminds us that education isn't just about acquiring a set of skills or passing a test.
Right.
It's about something much bigger, much more profound.
Yeah.
It's about nourishing the soul,
Yeah.
cultivating a sense of wonder, and equipping ourselves for a life of purpose and meaning.
And nourishing the soul, as Mason reminded us, begins with those divine words, the words that inspire us, challenge us, and ultimately connect us to something greater than ourselves.
Exactly. It's about cultivating a lifelong love of learning, a curiosity that doesn't fade when we leave the classroom but continues to propel us forward, seeking new knowledge, new experiences, and new ways of understanding the world around us.
It's a beautiful vision, and one that, I have to admit, has me feeling pretty inspired.
Yeah, me too.
I don't know about you, but I'm ready to grab a good book.
Yes.
Maybe even try my hand at writing a little poetry.
That sounds like the perfect way to honor the spirit of Charlotte Mason.
It really does. But before we go, we always like to leave our listeners with something to ponder, something to spark further reflection. So here's a final thought, inspired by Charlotte Mason's wisdom. If, as Mason suggests, the soul craves the infinite, how can we ensure that our educational pursuits, both for ourselves and for the children in our lives, are truly leading us towards that which is greater than ourselves?
That's a question worth sitting with for a while.
It certainly is. Until next time, keep those minds curious, those hearts open, and those souls nourished.